our first meeting in 2026. And I have a request for everyone here who is speaking. And there has been some concern about those who are in the audience not being able to hear us as members. So I would suggest that when you're speaking, bring the mic right up to your area of speaking, and that will help a great deal. And also, when you come to make a presentation at the speaker's podium there, please speak into the mic. It just helps everybody hear better. So, thank you very much. Without further ado, I have to recognize that there may be people out there interested in participating in future meetings, and you can register online using the delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca delegation, or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. Now, for the committee members, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be reported? Seeing none, thank you. Now we will proceed to our delegations for our first item of business. And for the delegations, we recognize that the city has certain values and encourages participation and dialogue in a democratic process that occurs in council and committee meetings and through written submissions and correspondence. It is important that these interactions remain respectful towards other members of the public, the staff, and committee members. In cases where dialogue is not respectful or a delegate interrupts committee members, staff, or other delegations, or makes derogatory statements about committee members, staff, or others that are disrespectful, or uses hate speech, language that is considered harmful or defamatory, the chair may interject and take necessary actions to maintain a respectful and inclusive environment for everyone, which could involve removal of and from the meeting. And we have yet to have anything happen like this, which is wonderful. And I do believe we operate in our best interests, and we are very kind to one another in this chamber. So, 4.1, the draft Heritage Impact Assessment, which is 30 Margaret Avenue, and the report is DSD 2025-011, and Victoria Groon, Heritage Planner, will provide a 5-minute presentation. Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Guess I need the... Apologies, I did not have the clicker to go through the presentation slides here. Thank you. So planning staff is in receipt of a draft Heritage Impact Assessment for the property municipally addressed as 30 Margaret Avenue. The subject lands are located within the Civic Centre Neighbourhood Heritage Conservation District and designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The HIA is a required submission of a full site plan application. The development proposal contemplates a 6-story building with 261 residential units. This property may be familiar to some members of the Heritage Kitchener Committee, as this is the third development proposal that's come forward on this site. As a reminder to the committee, no decision on this development will be made this evening, and the report is still in draft form. The purpose of circulating the HIA to the committee is to receive comment and feedback on the development proposal, and for staff to take back these comments as we continue to take undertake a review of the application and work through the site plan process. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'd now like to turn it over to Christy Kirwan and Dan Curry from MHBC to present the draft report to the committee. Thank you.
So we have our delegation, and then Dan Curry and Christy Kerwin. Are you here? Okay, thank you. So Dan, you're going to do an overview then of the presentation.
My mic is on. Just doesn't come with the red button. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Christy and I are with MHBC and prepared the Heritage Impact Assessment. Also with me from MHBC is Andrea Sinclair, who is planner on the file dealing with the site plan application. And Paul Levesque and Catherine McCutcheon are also here representing Vanmar. They're the ones developing or proposing to develop the building. And they're all here. If there are any questions that relate to their areas of expertise, they can assist. So I've got a few slides. I'll endeavor to move through several of them fairly quickly and not repeat the overview that Victoria gave. But this is a large parcel on Margaret Avenue that I expect the committee and the members of the public that are here are well familiar with. It's been vacant for many years. There were a number of historic buildings constructed at the same time as most of the rest of the neighborhood that were demolished in the late 1980s, and the property has been vacant since that time. Just some views of the property as it looks today. As Victoria mentioned, there have been other proposed developments, one as recently as 2019, where there was a similar size building, a 6-story building that was proposed and ultimately received heritage permit approval. And there have been others, but that one is maybe the most relevant in terms of it's similar in its form and massing to this building. And this was the 2019 approved development. It ultimately never was constructed, in part because it was relatively ambitious and an expensive building. The market conditions just didn't support it, from what I understand from the developer. What is proposed, the current proposed building, is, as Victoria mentioned, it's 6 stories. There is a level of underground parking. The materials are limestone veneer, red brick, and steel. And Paul has brought a selection of the materials and are here. If you have questions about the materials or want to know anything further, he can certainly assist with any questions. A couple of the differences between the 2019 proposal is that there's a public park proposed adjacent to the church that abuts the building. And in terms of the planning approvals, the proposed development complies with the in-force zoning regulations. So what's required is a site plan approval and the heritage permit, but there isn't a need to amend any of the zoning regulations in regard to height or setbacks or parking or other things for that matter. This is a site plan looking obviously down from above in plan view of the proposed building shown in brown. It shows up on the screen here in kind of light green or pale yellow would be the park that's on the right-hand side of this figure, and the surface parking is shown in gray. The front elevation is the topmost figure on this diagram. And you can see the materials. The central component of the building, the central entrance, those materials are primarily glass, and that's meant to sort of break up the mass of the building It's a very long property, close to 100 meters, and it's a long building, and it's articulated. You can kind of see in the lower left building elevation. Is that the gong? I'm at my 5 minutes, Madam Chair? Okay, I will go very quickly then. We can come back to many of these slides if you wish, if there are any questions. I'll get to the important evaluation and impact assessment part. The building here is shown in plan view. This is in the Heritage Impact Assessment. That's my 30 seconds.
Can you sum up in about
I can.
3 points?
I can. What I will sum up with is there was an angular plane analysis that was conducted in 2019 that evaluated the location height in response to buildings, the properties that are adjacent. We've done the same thing here. This building is somewhat shorter, and it equally meets the angular plane analysis. The purpose of the angular plane is because there is one of the policies that are specific to the Margaret Avenue area. It's one of the guidelines, actually. It's the third one down. Building step backs are encouraged for any development greater than 3 to 4 stories in height. There are no step backs proposed on this building. Instead, what that angular plane analysis shows, that the same thing can be accomplished by simply the placement of the building in relation to the neighboring properties without the need for a step back. And that was the same analysis done in 2019, which was ultimately approved. And then lastly, these 2 charts that are on my slides are the policies and the guidelines that apply to the Margaret Street area, which is a site-specific set of policies that only apply to this property. And this is incorporated in detail in the HIA that it complies with all of those. The only thing I'll mention, in addition, knowing that I should end within the next few seconds, is that there's both a policy and a guideline in terms of retention of healthy trees. There were a number of trees on this property prior to 2019 as part of the previous redevelopment. The ones that had to be removed were removed. There's a number around the perimeter that still exist. The proposal is they will be retained. You can see on the site plan that that's the landscaped open space and amenity area. That's the intent. And then lastly, the conclusion is that there's no impact to adjacent properties. The proposal meets the guidelines and policies specific to Margaret Street. There is a recommendation for vibration monitoring and construction fencing to ensure that the adjacent properties aren't damaged during construction. And additionally, now that there's a park, there's an opportunity for some commemoration through the naming of that park, should the other city departments think that appropriate. So I went quicker than I wanted to, but hit some of the key points. Obviously, there's a lot there. Happy to revisit anything through questions, both for me or if there are for the developers. But thank you for allowing me to go a little bit over time, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Dan. And now that you're here, I think questions are in order for the delegation, to the delegation. Are there any questions for the delegation? Yes, Councillor Chaplin.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, is it the same owner that owned the property back in 2019 when this was first brought to Heritage and to Council?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it's not.
It's a different owner.
Yep, yes, it's a different owner. It's Vanmar who owns it now.
And how long has Vanmar owned it?
Sorry, what was that?
I know this sound is terrible. How long has Vanmar owned it?
I'd have to ask Paul that question.
Since the spring of 2025.
Since the spring of 2025, so not quite a year.
Okay, so after the second iteration or proposal in 2022, 2023. So it was after that date?
Yeah, correct. Activa purchased the property at some point before 2019. They proposed the 6-story development, which I showed on the screen. Subsequent to that, they proposed townhouse development. I forget the number of units on it in, I think you're correct, in 2022. They subsequently sold it. Van Mar has purchased it about a year ago.
Okay. And you say in your presentation that there's no impact on the adjacent properties. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Certainly.
I don't mean just vibrations. I mean, you know, thinking the fact that it's in a heritage district and what impact that might have.
Yeah, certainly. There's really two levels of assessment that's been undertaken. So first off, I think it goes without saying there are no heritage attributes. The property is vacant, so it's not a question of is there any impact to a removal on the property. It's all about, does the proposed development comply with the guidelines and policies that are set out in the Heritage Conservation District Plan? And does the proposed development impact the heritage attributes of the Heritage Conservation District? So the heritage attributes, I've got them on a slide, and if you want to see them, I can bring them up, but they're very high level and relate to the entirety of the district. The proposed development will not negatively impact those attributes. Can I just get the presentation back on the screen for a second? These are the heritage attributes taken directly out of the Heritage Conservation District Plan. So as you can see, I mean, obviously it's a long ways from Hibner Park, there's no impact. The second last attribute, the presence of an attractive and consistent streetscape, obviously this building plays into that. Otherwise, there are no impact on the attributes. And so the second level of analysis is, does it comply with the policies and the guidelines? And so we've summarized just on this slide, but it's described in detail in the Heritage Impact Assessment, how the building complies or does not with both the policies and the guidelines. And this summarizes it in that it complies with those guidelines and those policies. And I spoke to the one where we've taken a different approach to how the guideline is worded in the document. And it's summarized here in the third row. Building stepbacks are encouraged for any development greater than 3-4 stories in height to address impact on the pedestrian environment on Margaret Avenue. So that guideline's really only for Margaret Avenue. And we applied the same approach as we took in 2019, which is to look at it, if there's not going to be stepbacks, take an angular plane analysis, and how does that play out? And we did that both for Margaret Avenue and for the ends of the building. So for example, 54 Margaret is the property that directly abuts to the west, and the building is set back far enough that a 45-degree angular plane can be met. So that's how we come to the conclusion that there is no impact on surrounding properties because it meets the policies and the guidelines and does not negatively impact the attributes of the Heritage Conservation District.
And is there any attempt to conserve or to replicate or to honor the heritage attributes of the homes that used to exist there?
And are you asking me, Councillor, that the homes that used to exist on the property or the homes that surround the building?
No, that used to exist on the property.
Yeah, there's no attempt to replicate the houses through design, given that they're single detached houses.
Replicate probably isn't the right word, like to honor them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the design of the building, and if you want, we can go to the detailed site plan and I can show you. But the front facade, the first level units, have direct accesses from those apartment units to the street. And that was done purposely to, not to replicate the units, but, or the houses that previously were there, but we've got a neighborhood that is single detached lots that are relatively narrow and long. So having ground floor openings with sidewalks that go out to the street conveys some of that similar intent of trying to do a vertical distribution of the property, of the building, given that it's very, very long. The only other thing I would say is that the park gives an opportunity to provide some commemoration around the ownership of the previous properties, and we've identified that in one of the recommendations.
Okay, I can keep back in if there are other questions.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other questions for the delegation? Yes. Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one simple question, I think, to the delegate, and I appreciate that you're not the architect, but I'm wondering if you have the rationale for why a mansard roof was incorporated into the design. I'm pretty familiar with this neighborhood, and I think, by and large, when you look around in the neighborhood, it's largely built in, English traditional styles,
Yep.
as opposed to French. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that item.
Through you, Madam Chair. I'll give a partial answer, and then Paul, if you want to speak to kind of the detailed design that may assist with that answer. The mansard roof, the Heritage Conservation District Plan identifies roof styles and identifies those that are represented in the district, and mansard is one of them, albeit there are few mansards within the Heritage Conservation District. The other reason is that there's a maximum height limit, and the attempt is to minimize the height of the building while still maximizing the developable floor space. And so a mansard roof, given that it is one of the representative types of roof types within the district, is one way of doing that architecturally. But Paul may have some additional information that might be helpful to your question.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Two particular reasons, I guess, from an architectural standpoint. First one, we recognize when Activa put forth their first proposal, they also had a mansard roof. And we recognize there was a lot of work and consultation that was done with the community through that design process. So we felt that it was important to maintain some of that work that had been done through our design. And then the second one was, the mansard roof does provide an opportunity to lower the soffit line of the building. So on a 6-story building, just bringing that down a story just allows the building to feel a little bit shallower in height than a full 6-story and just a flat roof kind of thing. So those were the two primary reasons from an architectural standpoint. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Grant. Any other questions? Yes. Magda.
Thank you. It's a little bit difficult to tell because of just the scale of the building, but what is the setback at the front of Margaret Avenue to the front of the building?
Certainly. And it might be helpful, again, if I could bring up the site plan, but I've got the numbers here that I can speak to as well. The front yard setback is 3 meters. The previous Activa building was approximately 6.5, so it is closer to the street than the Activa building on the front yard setback. The side yard setback adjacent to 54 Margaret Street is approximately 18 meters. The previous Activa building was 13 meters, so it's a greater setback. The rear yard setback, the property boundary at the rear is irregular, and that setback, and also the building is irregular, given it's kind of that W shape, I guess, if you will, ranges from 13 to 25 meters on the rear yard setback. And of course, there's a park now on the other side, and that setback is the width of the park, which I think is about 25 meters.
Thank you, Meg. Are there any other questions? Yes, Peter.
I'd like to ask some questions about parking.
Parking?
Parking, service parking. We have a total of 263 parking spots for the project. And how many of those projects are at, how many of those spots are at grade, and how many are under the building?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I believe it's approximately half. But can somebody help me with the number?
Around 75 on surface?
75 on surface. 75 on surface. The balance are in the underground parking garage.
So 75 are on the surface?
Yes.
Okay. The information that was in the assessment that was circulated, some of the numbers were a little hard to read, so I just want to confirm
Sure.
these things. You know, first one, the front yard setback is 3 meters from the property line.
That is correct.
Okay, and the elevation of the building at the front from grade to the top of the parapet is how much?
I believe it's 21 meters.
So it's 21 meters high.
Yeah, the roof line varies as you go across. The tallest part is approximately 21.
Okay. And how long is the front elevation total?
The property is 92 meters and change. Oh my gosh, I didn't write that one down. Does anybody have the complete?
It looks like 140. I couldn't quite make out the numbers. The length of the building.
Yeah, the length of the building. I thought I did write that down here somewhere. No, the property itself is about 92 meters or 95 meters or something like that. So it'll be less than that. It'll be less than the number that you're thinking it is. Okay, we'll see if we can endeavor to get you that number as soon as we can.
Okay. There's one level of underground parking, I take it. One level of underground parking?
Yes, there's just one level of underground parking.
The number of spots that are currently delegated for underground parking, does that take up the entire space underneath the building? There's no parking plan submitted with the application.
Yeah, I'd turn it over to Paul.
Through you, Madam Chair. The underground parking is limited to the footprint of the building, save and except for, if you look at the footprint of the building, it's kind of a W shape. There's two wings that are close together. The area in between those two wings is also underground parking, but it's limited to the depth of those wings.
So there's an area of parking that expands past the footprint of the building?
Just in that one little area, so as you're sort of coming around towards the ramp, coming into the underground, there's a small parking area with 14 spaces. There's underground under that parking area.
How many elevator cores are in the building?
So,
Elevator cores?
there's one elevator core with 3 elevators.
So there's one in the middle of
In the middle, right near the front lobby, yes. So there's an entrance from the back of the building and from the front of the building that goes into a common corridor and common lobby. And the elevator is right off of that lobby that services all floors.
Okay. Can you tell me what the intended ownership of the building, the form of ownership? Is this a condominium? Is this a rental?
It's proposed to be rental, purpose-built rental.
Purpose-built rental?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a schedule that you have for this development that you would anticipate occupancy by?
We're hoping to start construction in 2026, pending approval. And we have phased this building into 2 construction phases. So the first one would be phase 1 closest to the park, sort of half the building from the lobby to the park side. And then phase 2 would be subsequently constructed immediately after during occupancy of the first phase. So complete duration of construction would probably be about 24 to 30 months roughly from beginning to end.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have an answer to one of Peter's earlier questions. I was wrong. You were closer. It's 148 meters.
148 meters?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Oh. One more question. Brief question. You're not complying to the not the requirement, but to the suggestion that there be a setback from the elevation of the building after 3 or 4 stories. There's a 2-meter setback. And I understand that you're saying that there are other conditions that make that unnecessary, but I'm just wondering why in the first place did you make the decision not to have the building set back in that manner?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. There are a number of decisions that Paul and the architecture team would have looked at in terms of the design of the building and the functionality of it, and given that it is 6 stories tall. In relation to the intent of the guideline in the Heritage Conservation District Plan, we took the same approach, or our advice to them was, one option is the same approach that the developers took in the 2019 building, whereby it's not step back, but you can achieve the same intent, depending on the height of the building and the placement of the building, to ensure that the height and the location don't overwhelm the pedestrian environment in this case, or in the case of adjacency to, in particular, 54 Margaret Street, you can still assure that that happens. So there were both options available, in our opinion, in order to achieve the same intent. They chose to look at it, or to design a building that it does not have a 2-meter step back every story or every 2 stories after the 3 stories. And so when we reviewed that, based on the location, concluded that it does achieve the intent of that guideline, and therefore, in this case, similar to 2019, there's not a need to physically make a 2-meter setback at various steps as you increase the height of the building.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? Yes, Natalie, thank you.
Just had a question regarding the snow storage, specifically along the back of the property there that would be then on to the adjacent homes on Ellen Street. Is there any measures to prevent the snow from, touching those back fences, anything like that with those properties?
There will be a fence constructed around the perimeter of the building that will be on the subject lands. So the fence itself prevents, I suppose, inadvertent snow piling across the property line. As for the snow melt, unless Paul has anything he wants to expand upon, there's sufficient distance to accommodate the snow, sufficient area. But anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. That was one of the comments that came back through our site plan review process. So we are introducing a retaining wall along the back portion of the property, approximately 10 feet away from the curb line, that will prevent snow melt from going to the backyard of property line, and it will be pushing the snow melt back into the parking lot area, which will be contained through catchment basins and pushed out that way.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nat. Any other questions? I just wonder, Dan, have you or your consultant team taken a look at the rooftops in the area adjacent to this proposed development?
Are you asking me if we've done, say, a survey of the surrounding properties and compared the types of rooftop designs?
Yes, like color and finish of the roofs.
We haven't done an explicit survey, Madam Chair. We're familiar with the area, having done work and as a result of both work on this building and the previous one. There are not many mansard roofs. The only mansard roof that might be in the proximity, there's a building across the street that has a bit of a tower feature on it that has a mansard roof. Most of the properties that surround this are single detached houses, and most are gable roofs and variations on that. And most of them have shingle material. So while this building, as I've described, conforms with the policies and the guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District Plan, it's not the same as the surrounding. I mean, across the street, there is a 3-story apartment building with a flat roof, circa, I would say, 1960s. And of course, there's the tall one on Queen Street. But it's not, in our view, necessary that it be similar or replicate, but that it fit. And the definition of whether it fits or not are the policies and guidelines that were expressly put in place, in our opinion, for the Margaret Street special policy area, which is this property. So that's how we get to the conclusion that notwithstanding the roof in this case and some of the other components of the building are very, very different than the house form buildings that surround it, it's still compatible with, complementary to, and fits with ultimately the overall district.
So if I may, your choice of roof style is kind of like a mansard. And so I'm not clear by the pictures whether you're choosing shingles or whether you're choosing sheets of metal to cover it. Have you decided on that? What would it be? And then I'll ask you about color.
Sure. It's proposed to be metal. It will be metal roofing.
Right. And it looks as though you have black. And to me, the black in this particular neighborhood really would stand out. So I'm wondering, have you thought of, say, maybe toning it down to a darker brown or lighter brown? Or have you given any thought to that? I mean, your applicant.
Sure, and Paul can certainly speak to it. It is proposed, or at least the initial design is a very dark color for the roof. I don't think it's black, it's a very dark gray, I think. But Paul, is there anything you wanted to speak to or open to comments on color?
Yeah, Madam Chair, right now it's proposed to be a dark gray. Might come off as black in the renderings, but it is a dark gray. We are open to discussing, color variations and materiality. We think it's very important to the aesthetics of the building, so we are open to suggestions from the committee.
I wasn't sure that it was. I hadn't recognized it was gray. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have another delegate, Chris Mulligan. And Chris, you're aware that the ding comes on in 5 minutes, not to shout.
With a 30-second warning. I've been warned. Hi, everybody. My name's Chris Mulligan. I am the owner at 54 Margaret, along with my fiancée, Jane. And we live there with my son, Quinn, and our three-legged dog, Raven, who's way more famous in our neighborhood than I am. Our house is listed as a Group A, or of high cultural value. It's quite simply a beautiful building. We've lived there since 2018, and we see it as our custodial duty to improve and invest in this iconic heritage house. I've lived in Kitchener my whole life. Jane has moved here recently from Guelph, and her and I support responsible and appropriate development, especially in the downtown core. We recognize the value of infilling. As currently proposed, we do have 4 main concerns about the current development proposal at 3040 Margaret. Our house will be adversely affected by shadowing, isolation, obstruction of views to and from, and increased traffic. We feel that these issues have been downplayed in the Heritage Impact Assessment Report, which only focuses on the potential damage due to vibration and inconveniences during construction. Shadowing clearly impacts much of our property, especially in the front of the house, all morning in the spring, fall, and especially winter months. The impact of shadowing on the heritage attributes of 54 Margaret is not negligible. Our home at 54 Margaret will be isolated by the proposed development at 30 Margaret by physically separating our home from our surrounding neighbors and thereby reducing the heritage context along the north side of Margaret. The isolation of our home is doubled by the recently completed development at 64 Margaret, immediately on the other side of us. The impact of isolation on our home is not negligible. Our house is set back 17 meters from the sidewalk on Margaret. The proposed development is set back just 3 meters with no step backs, even though step backs of 2+ meters are recommended. The previous development plan proposed and approved in 2019, which is similar in many respects to this current plan, was set back 6.28 meters. The currently proposed development will obstruct the view of 54 Margaret and its exceptional character along the street. In the documents provided, the draft report, it shows only one vehicle entrance proposed for the development right along our eastern property line. This, along with the single driveway entrance to 64 Margaret immediately on the other side of us, will increase traffic flow significantly on both sides of our house and may interfere with traffic at Maynard Avenue, also adding to the isolation of our house from the surrounding neighborhood. So we've talked at length about this, Jane and I, and we have some potential solutions that we've thought of that may help reduce the adverse heritage impacts on our home. Number one is setbacks. Moving the proposed building back 2 to 3 meters from Margaret Avenue may help to preserve our home's prominent street character and sense of place in the heritage district and reduce the potential isolation of our house. We propose this solution with the proviso that it not impose further on our Allen Street neighbors. Number two, step backs, especially on the sides of the proposed building. These are a viable solution to our shadowing issues and would allow more sun to reach our house earlier in the day. Step backs along Margaret Avenue would also decrease the perception of height and would reduce the sense of isolation to our home. It would also be a compromise and more closely aligned with the building style recommendations in the Civic Center Neighborhood Conservation District Plan. Solution number three, daylight corners, which are an angled, rather than having a 90-degree angle on the side of the building, they're cut at a 45 daylight corner. Can further help make the proposed building feel a little less imposing and would give 54 Margaret a bit more space to breathe, in addition to providing a vintage look to the new development. The current size of the proposed building at 30 Margaret will dominate the neighborhood and detract from its heritage character. To make the building less imposing, we suggest that ensuring the main floor units on Margaret have front door access from the street. In a heritage neighborhood such as ours, most of our neighbors go in and out through a front door and interact on the street. May I continue? I don't have much more. Thank you. Front doors along Margaret would also improve safety and security of our neighborhood by ensuring more eyes on the street. Dan alluded to there being some front doors in the design, but in the diagrams it shows windows. So it's a little bit unclear at this time. The last point I'd like to raise is that the park proposed at the east end near the church as a part of this development could also be moved to the west end, nearer to our home. This would push the whole development further from our property line, lessen the impacts on our house from construction, and reduce the isolation and shadowing on our home. In summary, we're proud to live at 54 Margaret. It's an important house to us, and it's an important heritage resource for the city. The proposed development offers an exceptional opportunity for our neighborhood, and we believe that with a few changes, it will exceed the standards and guidelines expected of developments in our district. It's important that we take steps to protect our heritage resource and abide by the guidelines outlined in the plan. We are doing our part as owners of a heritage home to maintain, invest, and protect its value and character, and we hope that the city and the developer will do no less. Thank you.
Chris, did you give your address?
Pardon me?
Your address, where you live?
54 Margaret. It's directly west of the proposed development site.
Are there questions for the delegations for Chris? Yes. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming in. Have you spoken to the developer or to staff about your suggestions?
No, not so far. We did meet with Activa in 2019 when they had their proposal, but we haven't spoken to Van Mar as of yet.
Okay, I guess I would ask the developer, would you be amenable to meeting with Chris? Yes?
Yes, Chris and I have exchanged emails and agreed to have a meeting, and Paul is agreeable to that as well.
Okay, good. Pleased to hear that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other questions for Chris? Yes, Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chris, for coming in. I don't know, with the materials that were submitted, it looks like it's an appendix to the HIA. There was a shadow study that was included in that. Have you had an opportunity to take a look at that at all?
Yes, Jane and I have reviewed the draft document that was made available.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, I guess that was my main question. I just didn't know if you had an opportunity to kind of see throughout the year what those impacts could potentially be.
Yeah, there were a few confusing items within the document, but we made our way through it and seemed to understand the main thrust of what's going to happen.
Appreciate it. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Any other questions for Chris? Thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks for your time.
Our next delegation, Ilona Herman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Heritage Committee. My name is Ilona Herman, and I also live on Margaret Avenue, not far from where the development is being proposed. I'm here to speak to you about the draft Heritage Impact Assessment for 30 Margaret Avenue. This property is very unique. It is the single largest vacant lot in the Civic Centre Heritage District Conservation Area and sits beside two of the district's most important heritage properties, 54 Margaret Avenue and the Church of the Good Shepherd. What happens here will either reinforce the character of the district or fundamentally weaken it. The Civic Centre Heritage District Conservation Plan includes special area-specific guidelines for the exact site. These guidelines are clear. Keep height and massing sensitive to the surrounding 2 to 3 story houses. Use step backs of at least 2 meters or larger on taller portions of the building to reduce the impact on the street, and make sure that new developments don't visually overwhelm the adjacent Group A properties. The proposal in front of you is 6 stories with a not consistent step back above the third and fourth story. Instead of showing how it meets the district guidelines, the HIA uses the angular plane analysis and says that's good enough. But step backs are also what the plan calls for. In effect, the HIA neglects the policies we have here, and uses only one as a standard for more conveniently addressing the current design. The HIA largely confines its analysis of impact to 54 Margaret Avenue and the Church of the Good Shepherd to construction vibration. But the district plan is much more than that. It speaks to the setting, the views, the scale relationships that give these properties their prominence on Margaret Avenue. Placing a 6-story wall next to a 2-story Queen Anne house and a historic church complex inevitably changes how these buildings are experienced from the street. That's a heritage impact. Yet the HIA doesn't give clear visual analysis, no compelling street-level comparisons, no proper study of how the new mass will dominate the view down Margaret Avenue. Without that, it's hard to accept the conclusion that the heritage impacts are minimal. The HIA suggests that new parkland on the site is a heritage benefit. While I'm definitely not opposed to new parkland, and it would have a very positive impact on the neighborhood, but this is not a heritage mitigation measure identified in the district plan, and it does not change the fact that the building itself is taller and bulkier than the plan anticipated. We shouldn't let a planning benefit distract from heritage nonconformity. So I'm asking you to do 3 things. Do not accept this draft HIA as adequate in the current form. It does not convincingly demonstrate the proposal conforms to the Heritage District Plan. Ask for a revised design for 30 Margaret Avenue that includes meaningful stepbacks, reduced perceived height, and a better scale transition to the Group A heritage properties. And thirdly, require a revised HIA that evaluates real alternatives and provides clear visual evidence of how the building will relate to 54 Margaret Avenue and the Church of the Good Shepherd and the broader streetscape. You have a district plan that already tells you what the site needs. I'm asking you to defend that plan so that this very prominent property becomes a positive example of conservation and not a precedent for slowly eroding the district's character. Thank you.
Thank you, Alona. Questions for Ilona? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, hi, Alona. Thank you for coming in. I recall when this came to the committee last time, you had great concerns with the roof line. I wonder if you wanted to speak to that at all.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, I recall when this came to Heritage the last time, and you were on the committee, and you had concerns with the roof line. I wondered if you wanted to speak to that.
I'm still not understanding what you're saying, sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to say that the last time this came to Heritage, you were on the committee, and I recall that you had concerns with the roof line.
Yes.
I just wondered if you wanted to speak to that.
So the roof line last time was very square. It was much more of a brutalist design where there was not really anything that softened the roof line. It was just a flat roof, and there was no additional architectural features given to that roof. This particular proposal does offer a mansard roof, but I think it's only mansard in name. And the Heritage District Plan also calls for using materials that are much more in line with other roofs in the area, so shingled roofs as opposed to a metal roof. And then also sloped and more articulated lines on the rooftops. So it does talk about sloped rooftops and just different roof lines, varied roof lines, pitched roofs and gables and dormers. So this particular proposal does not appear to include that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other questions for Alona? With respect to the setbacks, as you read the plan, and you've read it carefully, the Heritage Conservation District Plan, what comments do you wish to share about the setbacks, if you have some?
So the Heritage District Plan calls for step backs above 3 to 4 stories, and that will improve the shadowing on surrounding properties. It also improves the articulation of the roof line itself. So when that is not included and the property is just very straight, or the building proposed is very straight, it takes away some of the character that could be added. So I'm definitely in favor of adding more articulation and just roof lines that are more in line with what the community has.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Alona.
Thank you.
So that finishes our representation from the delegations and the comments. And now it's up to the committee to comment, add, and this report is for information. Staff was seeking feedback regarding the draft impact heritage assessment and also the comments that you've heard from the delegations. And no motion is required at this time, but I think we've heard quite a few comments relevant to the Heritage Conservation District Plan that we could pass on to staff because it's now in staff's hands to deal with this development proposal. And I will say that it's interesting. This is about the third proposal we've had for the site. It's a big site, and it's a prominent site. You know, it's gem, I would say, probably, in the Heritage Conservation District or the Civic Center area. So I will open it up to comments for direction to staff. Yes, Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. I just had a quick question for staff. Was this property rezoned through the Growing Together initiative? I'm looking at the online zoning map, and I think it's SGA2, and I'm assuming they're just using the base zone to facilitate this proposal, but there's also some Res 4 site specifics that are coming out.
Excuse me, through the chair, yes, the property was rezoned through Growing Together West, and the current zoning on the property is SGA2.
And there haven't been any amendments to the zoning. They're just using base zoning, I assume.
As far as I know, correct.
Okay. And is the site plan application currently underway for this site?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know, from a scale of 1 to 10 or 100% maybe, how far along has that process been? Is this fairly early on, assuming that this is a draft of the HA?
Through the chair, we are still fairly early in the process. There was a site plan review committee meeting that took place between staff and the proponent a couple of weeks before the holidays, but we are still working through the site plan process.
Sorry, Grant. You're good for now. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Peter, please.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on two different areas, and I think they are interrelated. One is the parking on the site, and the other is the front elevation, the Market Street elevation, in relationship to the street. So the first is the parking, and the one thing that I find is antithetical in this proposal to the historic neighborhood is the amount of surface parking that is being proposed. I mean, almost the entire site, which is not building, is taken up with either asphalt parking or asphalt roadway. And extensive asphalt parking is antithetical to the character of this neighborhood. There is underground parking there, and I'm sorry that my apology. I did see a copy of the parking plan there, so I got that. And just looking very briefly at that plan, there is a section of the parking structure that is not underneath the building, in the one sort of section of the W, but not the other section of the W. I would suggest that by putting parking in the other part of the W would be a very straightforward change, but it would allow the moving of surface parking to underground parking. And I think that, and along with that, you could reduce the impact of the roadway that you have to provide to get to the surface parking. So moving parking underground would be much more consistent with the character of the neighborhood and would improve this building's relationship to pretty well all its neighbors around the back and the sides of the building. So my first point is that surface parking should be minimized, and it should be put underneath the building. My second point is that the front elevation of this building is very unusual, right? I can't think of another residential building in the city that has a front elevation of this scale. I mean, 148 meters long. It's like bigger than a lot of city blocks. 21 meters high, right? It's 6 stories plus the ornamental parapet in the front. So it's a very imposing building. And it is set back 3 meters from the property line. And a 3 meter setback against 148 meter elevation is simply out of scale with the street. And more has to be done to ameliorate the effect of the massing of that building in relationship to Margaret Street. And I think there's 2 things that would really go to help this. One is to increase the front yard setback from the proposed 3 meters to the allowable 10 meters. I think that would give a much more appropriate scale between the apartment building and the residential buildings on the other side of the street. And I think that the problem is very well illustrated in the section that you have provided, where you show 6 stories of the building against the couple of stories on the other side of the street. I think that eliminating some of the surface parking would allow you to move the building back in order to do that. I also think that a lot more effort has to be given into breaking up that mass of that large building into smaller and smaller forms to look like smaller buildings. There's been a start to do it, but I think it's really inadequate. The articulation, the sort of the little cutouts in the building, it helps to break the building form down, but it's not go nearly far enough. And what it does is it makes the building. It's not so much about light shadow for me as what is the appropriate scale of the building to the street. And critical to that is setback, and also critical to that is the vertical setback. And that 2 meter setback that happens at the 3rd story or 4th story goes an incredibly long way to reduce the form of the building in relationship to the street and make it much more humanly scaled. So I think that those are 3 things that I want to emphasize. Move the surface parking underneath the building, move the building back from the road, enforce the 2 meter setback. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. I wonder, Peter, if you wanted to elaborate on the style of the roof. Or perhaps you did, but I wondered if I'm struggling here with this look of the roof. And I wondered if you had anything to comment on that, how to break up the bulk.
I think that there could be more articulation to the roof. The building has a bottom and a middle and a top, right? Which is it's good, but the amount of articulation I think that could happen at the top level, accompanied with a setback, would do a lot to eliminate the kind of blockiness that the whole sort of massing of the building has.
So we talk in architecture terms about articulation. If I were a speech therapist, I'd talk about articulation. Back to articulation and architecture. In other words, when you're talking about the articulation, you mean like the in and out or the breaking up of a solid surface. What about, I'm thinking about Chris's concern about this solid wall next to this Queen Anne historic property. And so we have a solid wall Do you have any comments about that? As to alleviate the solid wall.
I think that it's coming more from not using or not facilitating the 2 meter setback requirement. If the setback requirements were used at the side yards as they were at the front yards, I think it would go a long way to help the sort of form of the building and the scale of the building adjacent to its neighbors.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any other questions or directions to staff? Yes. Preston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for staff. As the plan is being developed, has any consideration given to the streetscape, and are there any proposed changes to the street to accommodate the new density?
Through the chair, I believe that there are some streetscape plans that are going to be forthcoming. We have not done a fulsome evaluation of those yet, so I can't really speak to what's going to happen along the street at this time.
Okay, thank you. Just to roll that into a comment, which I think speaks to some of the other concerns on the committee. In general, with this proposal, I would, in some regards, commend the proponents for basically having an aesthetically pleasing fabric to the building that is overall consistent with most of the policies in the neighborhood. I do, however, share the concerns with shadowing and the setbacks and stepbacks and the overall bulk. I think Peter's point about moving the building backwards, setting it back, but also stepping it back could alleviate some of that. And then to tie it in with the streetscape potential changes, if there is a setback to be included, a greater setback, or some of these measures we've been discussing, I think some of the boulevard requirements or front yard requirements could, in some ways, meet the questions about articulation and how the front of the building interacts with the street. Some of that can be achieved through municipal landscaping, creating similar boulevards, similar, I guess, facsimile front yard accesses, which has been discussed with the front doors and the sidewalks. But I would just flag that as another potential means of integrating the building with the street. I do think if it is moved back and set back and stepped back, but also that the front has similar landscaping to the other properties, which can be achieved on the property itself, but then with the municipality and any changes to the street itself, that it can be the front of the building can be kind of ameliorated by that sort of landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you, Preston. Yes, Magda.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you said everything I wanted to say, but didn't know how to. So I fully support all of Peter's comments and Preston's as well. Yeah, I think that if we look at the preferred examples that were taken out of the neighborhood plan, it's on page 56 of the PDF 55 of the document. That the examples all have kind of everything that's been mentioned. Past 2 or 3 stories, there's a step back. There's in proportion to the height of the examples, there's setbacks from the street, and the images that are of the proposed development are sort of made really tiny, and I know these are just photographs and perspective drawings, but they're not at all to scale. So I would suggest even just looking at those preferred examples more. And I realize that there's, working with 6 stories is different than working with the 2 or 3 stories that are in these preferred examples. But I think, going back to those examples and kind of seeing what can be taken from them and applied to the proposed development to address some of these concerns that we've been discussing, I think would be a good idea, because it's a stark contrast. Like if we saw the perspectives to scale, it would just it's just not, you're not comparing apples to apples. So I wanted to mention that I thought that was a little bit misleading in the HIA report.
Thank you, Magda. Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fairly familiar with this site. I live in close proximity and I live in the district, so I've certainly been by here, lots. And I think one thing that we miss when we're looking at, a vacant site in the Heritage District is the effect that, a vacant or underutilized site can have a negative effect on the Heritage Conservation District, right? I know I'm working on a project in the Heritage Conservation District in Cambridge, and it's a big hole in the ground. And, one of the sort of, guiding principles is just to, fill in that missing tooth and really make, fill in that hole and make it right. On the whole, I think it's a really good looking building. I think the massing's really great. 260 units in this downtown location, supported by transit, very walkable. I'm certainly in support of that. Contrary to some other members on the committee, I think that a 3 meter front yard setback is excellent to see. I think it's efficient. I'd want to see the surface. I tend to agree with a reduction in surface parking, though I appreciate that there is still a demand for that in the market. So if that's what makes the performa work, I'd like to see it tucked in behind, and I think that's been achieved in this case. But in terms of the sort of interface with the street, I certainly do like that 3 meter setback. If you ever walk around me and my friend group, I'm often saying, that's a good looking building, but I think it just needs to come a lot closer to the street. So I think in this instance that's been achieved, helps create that sort of sense of confinement, really addresses the street, really puts the eyes on the street. I tend to disagree with the idea that a step back for 3 or 4 stories or above 3 stories is required. Setbacks, angular planes and setbacks are kind of falling out of fashion in terms of urban design. And for tall buildings, we're seeing these kind of retracted from design guidelines throughout the province of Ontario. They're also really inefficient and expensive to incorporate into the construction of buildings. And I don't think they really add a lot of benefit in terms. You can achieve similar outcomes with materiality and potentially even setbacks of the overall building, but I don't think it's offensive in this instance. I am also super thrilled to see that it's a rental, and I will say that the roof line is a bit curious. I'm sorry for bringing that up initially. I certainly don't have an issue with it. I would say that it's not a typical roof line, as has been identified by the consultant, but I just don't think it's terribly out of place. I think one benefit to this in particular is that when you look at the mid-century modern building across the street, and it does have a very flat roof, and it is a very kind of bland or stark, modern design. This helps tie the sort of Victorian architectural styles within the neighborhood together with some of the more modern buildings. It kind of bridges the different styles within the neighborhood. So that's kind of my perspective on that. I know that maybe that's a creative take, but yeah, those are the positives. I'm really in full support of the recommendations that were in the HIA. So I think that's good. I did have some concerns, but they're certainly not major. The only ones that I have is really related to materiality. I think that the limestone or the engineered stone on the front facade is a bit of a curious choice. I think so often is the case with these contemporary builds, contemporary architects, that there is a lot of materials going on the front claddings of buildings, whether it's suburban neighborhood or even in this case. So I might look to reduce that. I don't know if that sort of engineered stone is consistent throughout the neighborhood. Limestone, certainly, limestone sills and whatnot, but yeah. The other thing too is, on the rear elevation, some of the brickwork goes up to the second story. Now, given that the neighborhood is largely 2-story buildings with roof lines above them, I would like to see on the front elevation the brick come up to at least the second story. And, it is broken up with the, aluminum composite black at the patios up and down, but I think that would really help kind of be more consistent with the neighborhood. Red brick is certainly consistent with the neighborhood, although just a personal preference, and I think more consistent with southwestern Ontario would be like a yellow brick material from the red brick. But overall, I think it's a good looking building. So I'm excited to see this get in the ground.
Thank you, Grant. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the only thing I want to say is that, you know, there's virtue in having a blank slate, which I think, you know, we've got with this property. And you can be as creative as you want and as keep the design as close to the guidelines in the Heritage District Conservation Plan, or we can distance ourselves from it. And I think this is a great opportunity to stick as close to the guidelines as possible. So I think I'm not going to go through all the suggestions that have been made thus far, but I just encourage staff to you know, take up some of the suggestions that were mentioned by the delegates, to take that blank slate and make it into something beautiful for this district.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other comments? Yes, Magda.
I had a question for staff, if I may. I believe the staff report mentioned that the previous, the last proposal was not approved. Is that correct? Did not receive final approval, I believe.
Through the chair, I believe both previous iterations did receive approval, at least at the heritage permit stage.
Okay, but at like final, like to go ahead, not.
There was no final site plan approval, no.
Okay, and was that because it just didn't get that far, or because?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If I may as well, Chair, I do want to just reiterate to the committee as well that regarding the proposal that's currently proposed on this site, there is a heritage permit application that would be required as part of the site plan process and as a condition of site plan approval. So when a heritage permit application is submitted, it will be coming back to the committee. So I just wanted the committee to be aware that this is not the final opportunity for the committee to comment on this. It will be coming back through the heritage permitting process when appropriate.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, I will say that I was rather relieved when I saw the proposal. The contrast to the last proposal, which was terribly modern and terribly where I could find it out in the burb at the edge of the city. It really did not fit this particular area, in my opinion. So I do feel that there are interesting comments and suggestions that staff and you, the developer, and planning can work on and negotiate and bring out, as Councillor Chapman says, the very gem and the very beauty part of Margaret Avenue. And I do remember when those houses were sitting there in 1987 and then in 1988 when they were demolished, and over and over and over, and it's been sitting over and over and over empty, and it's been sitting there. So I do look forward to seeing something come of this work that has been going on. And I trust that the committee comments, they may differ in ideas. However, I think they can be resolved and worked on. So thank you very much then. That concludes this item. All right. We're going now, notice of intention to designate, which is 160 Cortland Avenue East, DSD 2026-005. And Michelle Drake, Senior Heritage Planner, will provide a 5-minute presentation.
Through the chair, thank you. So this property would have previously come to you through one of our Municipal Heritage Register update reports. I believe at that time our Heritage Planner Deeksha was the one that presented the information to you. You did direct the committee to proceed with the formal process under the Ontario Heritage Act. So this evening we are here with you to present the notice of intention to designate for 160 Cortland Avenue East. The subject property is located on the north side of Cortland Avenue East between Madison Avenue South and Cedar Street South. It is a two-story 20th century brick building, originally constructed in the Edwardian Classicism architectural style. A brief overview of the criteria that was previously presented. The property meets 4 out of 9 criteria for designation and is recognized for its design physical, historical, associative, and contextual value. The property demonstrates the design physical value as an early institutional example of the 20th century Edwardian Classicism architectural style, with later additions that were added over time. The historical and associative value of the property relates to its direct associations with public education. My apologies, I think that may be a typo, with the Catholic school system within Kitchener. The building itself was constructed circa 1922 to 1925 by the Catholic or the separate school board. It also has historical value due to its direct association with the adjacent church at St. Joseph's Church at the corner of, I guess that would be Cortland and I think Madison. That church was previously before the committee through the MHR update process as well, and that church has also since been designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So they do, relate to each other in terms of their association between the church and the Catholic school adjacent to the church. From a contextual perspective, there is that relationship with the church, but there's also the contribution that the school makes to the neighborhood, as well as the overall and the broader Cedar Hill, Schneider Creek cultural heritage landscape that's identified in our official plan. So with that, our recommendation to the committee this evening is that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intent to designate the property municipally addressed as 160 Cortland Avenue East as being of cultural heritage value and interest. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions about the property or questions about designation on this one? Seeing none then, I will present the resolution, the motion, that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 160 Cortland Avenue East as being of cultural heritage value or interest. And who would move this? Councillor Chapman. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And since it received approval, it will go to council for approval officially January 12th, 2026. And now on to Bill 23 Municipal Heritage Register Review Update, January 2026. And Victoria Gruen, Heritage Planner, and Michelle Drake, Senior Heritage Planner, will provide a 5-minute presentation on each of these properties. However, I will ask for questions on each property as we go. So, 156 Benton Street. Michelle, is that you?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. So 156 Benton Street is a property that we are bringing forward for your consideration to potentially proceed with the NOID process in the future. So it does contain a 2-story early 20th century brick building designed in the decorative Berlin vernacular architectural style. It is situated on a 0.13 acre parcel of land that's located on the west side of Benton Street between Cortland Avenue and Martin Street in the Cedar Hill and Schneider Creek cultural heritage landscape. The property does have design, physical value, historic associative value, and contextual value, with it meeting, and my apologies, I didn't update this slide, 3 out of the 9 criteria, and I will explain that as I go on. So the property has design physical value, as the building is a representative example of the decorative Berlin vernacular architectural style, featuring many intact heritage attributes, including the decorative brickwork, the gable roof lines, the front picture window with stained glass window, and others. With respect to historical and associative value, this is an area where I wanted to mention in the staff report, we had indicated that we felt that the property met, I believe it was criteria 4 in terms of direct associations with a person. However, upon further review, when we were prepping for our meeting today, staff did have a conversation about this particular example, and there is interesting history associated and a little bit of information provided about 2 previous owners, but nothing that confirms that those particular individuals were significant to like the neighborhood or the broader community. And also in some cases, like in the one example, they only resided there for a 2-week period. So we just felt that it didn't meet this criteria, but it does still meet 3 of the 9 and therefore does still merit designation for the other reasons before the committee. And then with respect to the contextual value, the property meets 2 of the contextual value criteria. So that being that the property is important in defining, maintaining, and supporting the character of the area, and that the property is physically, visually, and historically linked to its surroundings. The buildings contribute to the character of the Benton Street streetscape. Their location, orientation, and setback are similar to adjacent buildings, helping to define that street edge and contributing to the overall architectural rhythm of the street. The building is the same architectural style as the adjacent building, addressed as 158 to 160 Benton Street. And the building is also located in an area formed by a resident-led group known as the Schneider Creek community, as well as our Cedar Hill and Schneider Creek cultural heritage landscape that's been identified in our official plan. And then it's also the rear of the property also backs on and is adjacent to the Victoria Park Area Heritage Conservation District. So for those reasons, we are recommending or we are looking for your direction to move forward with the next step. That concludes this property. I don't know if I think I heard the chair say you'd like to pause at the end of each property and open the floor for comments. Is that correct? Through the chair, did you want to pause? This is the end of this particular property, or did you want us to present all of the properties?
Sorry, we'll take one at a time. So 156 Benton Street, are there any questions for staff on this one? Seeing none, thank you. Now we'll proceed to 42 Francis Street North. And we'll ask the question after you're finished, Victoria, if there are any.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So the property addressed as 42 Francis Street North contains a 2-story early 20th century brick house constructed in the Queen Anne architectural style. The building is situated on a 0.17 acre parcel of land located on the corner of Francis Street North and Duke Street West. And the property has design, physical, historic, associative, and contextual value and meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation. So the property has design physical value as it is a representative example of the Queen Anne style of architecture. While the building has undergone alterations over time, the architectural style of the building is still legible, which is why we feel that that this building is still representative and meets that criteria. The property has historic associative value as the building was originally owned by Daniel Hibner, founder of the D. Hibner Furniture Company. He was also mayor of the town of Berlin in 1894. So the updated statement of significance that was included as part of this report identifies that criteria 6 is also met. However, after looking into this a bit further in preparation for this meeting, we know that Daniel Hibner was the original owner, but we don't necessarily know if he designed or built the house or if he hired someone to design or build the house. So it's unclear to us at this time whether that criteria is actually met. And so given that we haven't been able to definitively determine if there is any historical or associative value related to a builder, designer, architect, etc., we have decided not to include this particular criteria as one of the one met for this property. And finally, the property has contextual value as it contributes to the character of the Francis Street North streetscape. And there is also a visual link between the property and the former D. Hibner Furniture Co., which was formerly located at 283 Duke Street West. So that concludes the presentation on this particular property. We can take questions.
Thank you, Victoria. Are there any comments or questions for Victoria on 42 Francis Street North? Seeing none, we'll have 5361 King Street East. And Michelle, it's yours.
So this property at 53 to 61 King Street East contains a 20th century commercial building designed or inspired by the Art Deco architectural style. The building is situated on a 0.4 acre parcel located on the south side of King Street East between Queen Street South and Benton Street in the downtown cultural heritage landscape. The property has design, physical, historical, associative, and contextual value, being that it meets 4 of the 9 criteria for designation. Through the chair, I just noticed that the presentation is not up. I'm not sure if perhaps we're having a technical, but just in case the committee wants to see. No, that's okay. So there is the location map and the photograph of the front elevation of the building. With respect to the design physical value, the property meets 1 of the 3 criteria. The property has design physical value because it is a rare example of a commercial facade inspired by that Art Deco architectural style. The facade itself was constructed circa 1941 on a 2-story commercial building, which that building was constructed with brick, steel, tile, and concrete block. The building to the north, which may not currently be perceived as a building to the north, did actually was lost to a fire in 1959, and so an extension was added to the building and to that Art Deco facade in 1966 to create one Art Deco inspired facade along the length of the building. The building features a rectangular plan, 4 bays across the front elevation, parapet roofline, cut stone construction, large store front windows, 2 rectangular pillars with aluminum canopy, 2nd-story casement windows with mullions in the form of a T, intermittent string course at sill level, incised circles between the windows, panels above the windows with vertical fluting, and incised horizontal banding across the top of the building. With respect to associative, historical and associative value, the property meets 1 of 3 criteria. The property has historic associative value because it has direct associations with the theme of economic development, relationship to the early dollar stores, or what were initially called the 5 and Dime, And locally, two examples were the S.H. Knox Company and the F.W. Woolworth Company. Also, various bargain stores over the years, and a particular individual, Walter P. Zeller, who was the founder of Zellers Limited. With respect to contextual value, the property meets two of the three criteria. The property has contextual value because it defines, maintains, and supports the commercial character of the surrounding area, as well as the physical, functional, visual, and historical link to the surroundings. The subject property is in the downtown cultural heritage landscape, which is at the city's core and a focal point for development in the city and the larger region. The area supports a range of uses, with banks, hotels, and other commercial businesses being the original anchors of this city core. The subject property's location and proximity to adjacent commercial buildings and orientation and massing and setback of the building help to define and maintain that consistent street edge on the south side of King Street East. In addition, the orientation, massing, setback, and design, along with materials, contribute to the continuity and character of that streetscape and the overall downtown cultural heritage landscape. The building is in its original location, thereby providing that physical, visual, and historic link to its surroundings, being King Street as the primary street in the downtown and the broader downtown cultural heritage landscape. And that concludes my presentation for this property.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any comments? Yes, Natalie.
Just had a question about the building immediately to the left, I believe. I know that building came to council before, or to the committee before, regarding designation. Has that been designated yet, or is it still in the stages or decline there? I only asked just because they are touching, so I just want to...
Through the chair, I don't have the answer on that off the top of my head. If you don't mind, I can follow up at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I'm curious, are staff aware in the research what use is up top of this building?
Through the chair, no, I'm not aware.
It's okay. I will just make the comment. I think this is a really good example that consistency with architectural styles don't necessarily, the same, everything being the same or consistent through architectural styles doesn't necessarily make a heritage district. This one is certainly atypical, certainly for being a commercial building, and I think it's a really interesting one. I walk by it every Saturday to go to the market, and I'm surprised it's not heritage already. I've always looked at it and thought, that's so strange, this standalone Art Deco building that's smushed between two much more modern buildings on the main strip of a mid-sized city, and I think that is just really excellent to see. So I'm happy to see this before us.
Any other comments? Well, I have a short historical item associated with this building. Frederick E. Hennig was born and raised in Kitchener. And in 1949, at the age of 17, he began as a stock boy and then a management trainee with F.W. Woolworth Canada at the location 5361 King Street East. He moved through successive leadership posts. In 1977, Hennig became Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Woolworth Store Division of the Toronto-based F.W. Woolworth Company Limited. In 1984, Hennig moved to New York. He was promoted to Senior Vice President for Worldwide General Merchandise Operations of the global parent company. In 1987, he became Global President and COO. And then in 1995, Hennig retired. And he still returned, well, he passed away, but he had connections with this area and never left them. Are there any other comments? Okay, we'll go on then to 4336 King Street East.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, the next property that we have in our presentation is 8 to 24 King Street East. So this property and building is a 19th century commercial building built in the Italian style of architecture. The building is situated on a 0.46 acre parcel of land located on the northeast corner of King Street East and Queen Street North in the city commercial core planning community. The property meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation. So the design and physical values relate to the Italian architectural style that is in good condition with many intact original elements. The building features yellow brick construction, individual facades, including some original Main Street storefronts, simple cornice with single wood brackets, and semicircular window openings with brick voussoirs. The building has significant historical and associative value. The historical and associative values relate to the original owner and use of the property, as well as the contribution that they made to the history of Berlin, which is now Kitchener. The original owner of the building was Louis Breidup, who was the original, and while the original use of the building was a hotel, the American Hotel, which was built by Breidup in 1862 to 1863 for about $9,000. The property also has contextual value as it is important in defining, maintaining, and supporting the character of the downtown commercial core, and it is one of the oldest buildings in Kitchener. It's also physically, functionally, and historically linked to its surroundings. So that concludes the presentation on this property. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Victoria? Seeing none, Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to take the next one as well. The property municipally addressed as 4336 King Street East is a one-story, late 19th century former schoolhouse built in the Georgian architectural style. The building is situated on a 1.4 acre parcel of land located on the corner of King Street East and Heldman Road in the Pioneer Town East Planning Community. And the property meets 2 out of the 9 criteria for designation. So the property is recognized for its design, physical, and for its historic associative values. The design and physical value of the property relates to the architecture of the old schoolhouse. The design, composition, craftsmanship, and details of the building results in a representative example of Georgian architectural style. The building is in good condition and is one of only 4 remaining one-room schoolhouses in the city of Kitchener. As such, it is considered a rare example of a one-room schoolhouse. The historic and associative value of the subject property relates to the former school known as Pine Grove, which once served the localities of Limerick, Pine Bush, Freeport, and Little Paradise. A log schoolhouse was first built in 1809, followed by a wood structure in 1855, and the current brick building was constructed circa 1889. The log house is reported as the first schoolhouse in the county, while the current brick building served as a school circa 1889 up until the mid-1950s. So staff has determined that the property does not meet any contextual value as the area has undergone immense development over time. And while the building is still in its original location, all surrounding context to this building has been lost. And that concludes my presentation on this particular property. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? So it is now Borealis, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So it's, I recall at the time when it was up, you know, nobody knew what was happening out in that particular area, Pine Grove and Pioneer Tower area. And the residents were really happy to see that it became the successful site and turned into a restaurant as it is. So it's lovely inside, and it's kept many of the features that you would find in the old school, in the school section. Thank you very much. All right, 33 Ontario Street North.
So the property addressed as 33 Ontario Street North contains a 6-story parking garage built in the brutalist architectural style. The building is situated on a 0.74 acre parcel of land located on the east side of Ontario Street between Gowdy's Lane and Duke Street in the downtown cultural heritage landscape. The property has design physical value, historical associative value, and contextual value, and meets, my apologies, my numbers don't match, but they will on our next slide. So it meets either the 3 or 4 criteria for designation, which is above the 2 threshold. So with respect to design and physical value, the property meets 1 of the 3 criteria. The property has design physical value because it is a representative example of a parking garage designed in the brutalist architectural style. The building is characterized by its functional and utilitarian design with its open air deck and exterior helix exit ramp. This type of design or architecture gained momentum in the 50s and presented economic advantages since ventilation systems were not required, fire codes were relaxed, and facades tended to hide that were hiding parking were no longer required. The garage itself is in good condition and features a rectangular plan and adjacent cantilevered exterior helix exit ramp, cast concrete facade on Duke West and Ontario Street North, including decorative details that emphasize horizontal and vertical lines, the utilitarian open air deck design, and approximately 9 meters of the Gowdy's Lane cast concrete facade with the vertical lines and the Electrohome mural. With respect to that mural, it was part of what was called the Kitchener Downtown Mural Program, which operated between 1995 and 2002. It was a mixed media plaster installation designed by an artist whose name I may not be pronouncing right, Christina Piori. It was sponsored by Electrohome and entitled Electrohome since 1907. It was completed in October of 1995. With respect to historic associative value, the property meets 2 of the 3 criteria. The property has historical and associative value because it has direct associations with the theme of urban renewal, the Kitchener Parking Authority, National Garages Inc., and McCarger, Hackburn and Associates. The property also has historical and associative value because it demonstrates the work of an architect, being the National Garage Inc. of Detroit and McCarger, Hackburn and Associates. And finally, with respect to contextual value, the property meets 1 of 3 criteria. The property has contextual value because it is physically, functionally, and visually linked to the adjacent properties and buildings. The parking garage is physically connected to the former Gowdy's department store, now the museum, and continues to provide a functional link via a hallway between the garage and the museum. The parking garage is visually linked to the complex of buildings at 30 to 32 Duke Street East, which was built in the international architectural style, but with influences from brutalist architecture. The parking garage and the adjacent complex both represent mid-century modern architectural styles that sort of broke from tradition or architectural precedents in the sort of desire to modernize the downtown during early urban renewal plans in the late 1960s. Those particular buildings are similar age, style, and materials, and they kind of define that upper end of Ontario Street North itself. That concludes my presentation for this property.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions, comments? Yes, Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, to be honest, I was a little perplexed or taken aback when I saw that this was coming here, I think I might be remembering correctly that parking assessment report from the city is looking at, their parking needs and whatnot. I can certainly appreciate a lot of the research here and the historical value of building like this, but I do not think that a large multi-story parkade in downtown Kitchener is worthy of a heritage designation, and I would not want to see that protected. I mean, these are certainly part of our history. I might argue a dark part of our history, building these and certainly municipally operating them. And I think ultimately we can commemorate a lot of the stuff. The mural, the Electra Home mural, something I think that's valuable. The spiral is interesting, though I don't know I would want to see it encumber or inhibit any redevelopment of the site. So I guess all that to say, if it's possible at the appropriate time when we vote on these, could we separate this item out? Thank you.
So this is 33 Ontario North. Yes, Peter.
Who will speak for the parking garage? I will. There is a unique convergence that happened in KW in the 1960s, late 60s to the early 70s, where there was a convergence of advanced concrete engineering coming out of the University of Waterloo, and a synthesis between local architects who are using this new technology in really exciting new ways. And we can look at the Fairview Mall, right? A beautiful example of how to take concrete engineering to these kind of new heroic levels. We see it on the walkways at Eastwood Collegiate, the beautiful concrete vaults that are there. These kind of engineering expressions, sort of mixed with architecture, are unique to our area, and I think that this ramp is a stunning example of that. It's heroic in its proportions. It is optimistic in its design, and I think it fully merits having the protection of a heritage designation.
Are there any other, thank you, Peter. Are there any other comments? Well, I have a confession. It was one of my favorite ones. As Peter said, it was such an inspiration when it happened to think that Kitchener actually stepped out of his sort of traditional classic mold and took this spiral look for the parking garage. My only disappointment was when someone within the department decided to paint the edges green, lime green. I didn't think it needed any sprucing up with lime green, but nevertheless, I support it, and I was glad to see it here. But we will, for you, Grant, we will take the item separately. Yes, and now our last one, 182 Victoria Street North.
My apologies. The property addressed as 182 Victoria Street North contains a mid-20th century religious building built in the neo-Gothic architectural style. The building is situated on a 0.26 acre parcel of land located on the west side of Victoria Street North between Erin Street West and Margaret Avenue. And it's also located in the Warehouse District Cultural Heritage Landscape. The property has design physical value, historical and associative value, and contextual values, and meets 4 of the 9 criteria for designation. With respect to design physical value, the property meets 1 of the 3 criteria. The building is a representative example of the neo-Gothic architectural style. With respect to historic associative value, the property meets 3 of the 3 criteria. The historical value relates to the original ownership and use of the building by the New Apostolic Church, as well as the associative values relating to Michael Krauss, the Versus restaurant, and the current owner tenant, the Chin Christian Church. And the property with respect to contextual value does not meet any of the three contextual value properties. So that concludes my presentation on that property.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions for Michelle? Comments? Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was actually excited to see this one as well. Personal connection to this one. You know, I live in very close proximity, and there's such a eclectic mix of styles and property standards and uses along Victoria. Victoria, and I live on Victoria. I can see this right out my window, and I don't know this to be true specifically, but I know that the delegation or the congregation that goes there on the weekends, it's very, very, very busy and very loud, and so I think it's a really beloved institutional use. So I think it's worthy of certainly protecting its unique exterior as well.
Thank you, Grant. Yes, it is amazing how it has had many, many uses over the years, and that it does remake and reuse itself, which is good to see. Great. Are there any other comments? Questions? All right. So that brings us to our voting and the motion. And so I'm going to take 33 Ontario Street North out, and we'll do it first. So, pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation be pursued for the following property: 33 Ontario Street North. Who would like to move this? Peter will move it. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed. So it is carried. And now we'll proceed to the rest of the proposals. Pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation be pursued for the following properties: 156 Benton, 42 Francis Street North, 53 6 to 61 King Street East, 4336 King Street East, 8-24 King Street East, and 182 Victoria Street North. Could I have a mover? Magda, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed, so it is carried. So this report has received approval from the committee, and it will be processed under designated approval authority. Great. All right, now to the information items. Are there any information items? I will say that, as you heard back in November, that the National Trust for Canada Conference is going to be here in KW's Waterloo region, and the committee that's organizing and working on the agenda is looking for ideas. And if any of you have interests in certain topics, or you know of speakers on certain topics, please send the information my way. And Victoria, you're on the committee as well. How about Michelle? Are you working too? So right now it's in the formation of ideas, and we're meeting bi-weekly. Again, the conference will be at the end of October of this year. Great. So, any other comments? Seeing none, who would like to adjourn the meeting? I'm sorry, Michelle, you're not about adjourn. You have
Through the chair, I just wanted to thank Mariah. Did check on the status of that one property that was raised earlier, which is 67 King Street East, and it was designated in 2024.
Thank you. Any other comments? Who would like to adjourn the meeting? Natalie will. Thank you very much, and see you in February.